Hello, everyone. We're with Michael Broomfield today, the Chief Executive. As you know, Michael's always very keen to engage with staff and get their views as to the direction in which we're travelling and try and get some feedback on some of the decisions that are made at a senior level. So we have tried many things, like Zoom meetings over COVID, etc. But recently, Michael has taken to going out to the emergency departments to meet with our frontline staff in particular, and he was accompanied by by the directors within the organisation as well. So he's here today to reflect on what he has heard so far. So Michael, first of all, how did you find the engagement with staff?
As always, John, a really valuable, worthwhile experience, and I want to thank staff for taking the time to speak to us. I recognise we were there at emergency departments, busy times when crews were coming in with patients, when they were waiting with patients, and sometimes then us wanting to have a conversation with them, to hear about the things that matter. And most of them may not always be the time that people are most inclined to do that, but it is one of the challenges that you've said that we have of how we can effectively do that. So very valuable. People are always keen to be frank, open, honest. We hear about the things that do matter most to them and concern them, but also I'm always so impressed by the number of suggestions people have about what things we can do differently, and that's where we learn, that's where we hear, and it's important we do it and keep doing it.
So then, talking about the things that affect them, you've been around quite a number of the emergency departments, and I know you intend to go out over the year as well, continuing it. But there were a number of recurrent themes that you have come back and you've given consideration to with the senior management team. So if you don't mind, we'll go through some of those. And I think that probably top of the list was about late finishes. What is the story with late finishes?
Yeah, and without a doubt that was the topic that was raised most, and understandably so, and rightly so, John. I think it's important, I said at the outset, I certainly said to the colleagues that I met out at the emergency departments that it is unacceptable for any member of staff to have to work on several hours on occasions beyond the end of their shift. Now, we all from time to time, something happens, there's a situation, we've all got to work later than you were planning, later than you were expecting, but that's very different for our staff, where it's a regular occurrence, and they don't know how long it will be, and it impacts at the end of an already long 12-hour shift. And for that to impact the way it does on people's personal lives, their home lives, the fact that they really cannot plan with any certainty beyond the end of the working day is not good enough, and so it's understandable they raise it, and it's important that we keep trying to do as much as we can about it. It's heavily linked to the delayed handovers at emergency departments. That is the primary reason for it, and that's one of those issues that's largely outside our control, although we influence heavily and raise it consistently with other trusts, with the department and elsewhere. We have taken measures over the last year or so. We're continuing to do that. They're not having as much impact as I would like. Me telling people when I'm out and about, here's what we're doing, I know that doesn't count for much, frankly, until it feels different for people and they can see a difference. But we have continued to prioritise sending crews coming on shift out to release their colleagues at EDs, rather than go to calls waiting, and that's a very fine balance that we need to get right, and we continually review that and try to prioritise getting crews released. We continue to try to get extra receiver shifts to be able to do some of those handovers. The Department of Health has recently issued new guidance on cohorting at emergency departments, so we're working with the other trusts to try to reintroduce that cohorting arrangement, which at least allows us to manage that in more of a dynamic way and get more crews away. But ultimately, making the real difference in this, it does require progress on reducing delayed handovers.
And are you confident that that progress will be made?
Given the challenge there's been over the last few years, and the fact I think you could say in recent weeks and even recent months it's got worse again, I wouldn't want to say I'm confident that it will improve anytime soon. What I would say, I'm confident there's a huge level of focus going into it. So the winter plan that the Department of Health produced, that all trusts have to contribute towards, had a couple of main indicators that are being monitored. One of those is ambulance handover delays, the other is discharges, and that obviously links. We all know it's the flow through hospital that backs up to emergency departments. So there's a real commitment to improve it. There's a real focus on it. We raise regularly with our colleagues in the other trusts the particular need to look at doing it around the end of shift periods, to let our crews get away, to let staff get home. There's a very recent initiative across all of the 6 health trusts, ourselves and the 5 hospital trusts, to have a new approach to a regional coordination of unscheduled care pressures, and a big focus for that work is on reducing ambulance delays at all times in the day. The sooner a patient arrives at hospital and gets in to get the definitive care that they need, the better it is for that patient, the less long they are likely to stay in hospital. If they stay outside in the back of an ambulance for many hours, and many hours, if not days, in the emergency department, they're likely to stay in hospital much longer, and that adds to the pressure. So there's a real renewed focus on that. And
so that focus is very welcome in terms of the RCC, etc. But realistically, it couldn't have come at a worse time, because we've winter pressures anyway, and the impact they're going to have to be able to make will be limited in the short term. Going forward, there will, I'm assuming, and maybe you can tell the staff about the monitoring process will be around that.
Well, you say it couldn't have come at a worse time. So I might say we couldn't have introduced it at a more important time. There was an agreement across all of the trusts to introduce it in advance of the worst of winter, and we know, despite the real very, very difficult period we've seen in the last 2 weeks, the really difficult period we know comes immediately post-Christmas and through January. So it was important to get that initiative in place, get it tested, embedded, and there is a 3 times a day focus with meetings with all of the trusts, with that regional coordinating centre, looking at the position right across a whole range of measures across trusts, from discharge, from moving patients from emergency departments into wards, but a heavy focus on ambulance handover times and handover delays to reduce those as much as possible.
So in terms of that, it's really watch this space. We're committed to monitoring the situation to try and ensure that late finishes are as infrequent as we can possibly make them, and where they're going to be there, we will do what we can internally to get staff released.
I think the whole system is committed to doing that, and I'm confident that is the case, and we'll play our part in that, which is a significant part, but we will also continue to look at what more can we do, and it has to be around prioritising getting our staff away at the end of their shift, to get them home, to get them rested, so that they're fit to come back and do the job we need them doing.
So then that dovetails nicely into the next issue, which is brought up. Staff are spending many hours at hospitals sometimes, and the issue of rest periods. That has come up quite a lot in your engagement with the staff. What's your thoughts on that one?
And again, there's a strong link here to the ambulance handover delays. If crews are arriving at ED and they're there for 3, 4, 5 hours, and we know sometimes longer, that makes it really difficult to get a rest period. And it's important, and people said this to me when I was out and about, this isn't about can they get something to eat. Most staff will admit that they find ways to get something to eat. It is the rest period is the important part. It's getting away from the vehicle. It's being able to sit down and relax and not constantly be mindful that, well, you're with a patient and you've got to be caring for them. So it is the rest period that's important. As I say, heavily linked to the problem we have with handover delays. So we need to continue that discussion with our trade union colleagues on how we can find more innovative ways of doing that. It is challenging to get crews back to station. I heard a range of views on that from some staff who feel that's important, other staff who are saying, get me somewhere that's suitable, that's the important thing, and protect that time. There are different views on the duration of rest periods and the number of them, so we'll be continuing those conversations with trade union colleagues. If we do make progress on the delayed handovers, I think that will also allow us to make progress on rest periods. But more fundamentally than that, I do think we have to agree a different way of providing rest periods so we can protect them and make sure staff get them and get them at the right time.
but we're absolutely not sitting on our hands waiting for the late finishes or the ED problems to turn around. We are working hard with the trade unions to find solutions to these.
We need to have those discussions and accelerate those discussions to come up. It's an issue, John, that has been being discussed for as long as I've been in this role in the ambulance service, and I hear the various options that are suggested, and we've got to bring that to some sort of conclusion. And yes, progress on late finishes will make it easier to manage, but whenever that happens, we still have to look at what's the most effective way of doing it in order to guarantee. This is about being able to guarantee staff get those rest periods when they need them and that they're protected, and at the same time that we can maintain a response to patients who call our service.
Yeah, and our staff on the front line, they work extremely hard, but then many more hours over the allocated 12-hour shifts or whatever length their shift might be. And there are times that throughout the year they'll be seeking annual leave, which they're entitled to and which they need to actually recharge. But that annual leave came up as an issue quite a bit.
It did, and when people raise it there, they also recognise the nature of the job, the 365 days a year, obviously the 24/7 nature, and people realise that they cannot always get the annual leave when they would want it, cannot get all of it. But what is important to them, there's certain key events that are important. There's certain key times of year, if they're trying to match their annual leave with a partner, with a family. And I absolutely get that. Again, those are the fundamentals that people expect, and we have to find a way to do that for our staff. So we do have a certain number of slots that are protected every day for annual leave, and that people book into those up to a certain level. They will get that annual leave, and that will be confirmed, a certain number for both NE and for PCS. Once we go over and above that, and that number is worked out on the basis that everybody could take their full entitlement each year. But of course, people don't always want to spread it out in a way that exactly fits into that. And there'll be certain times of the year, holiday times, that a larger number of people want to take their leave. So whenever that threshold is reached and people apply, that's when we get into this position that it's noted but it's not confirmed, and there are discussions that take place with local managers to see what can be done to accommodate it. I certainly want to see a process where we can recognise that there are certain times, certain events that are important to all of us, and that we can find a way to make sure staff get off, and there's a flexibility to do that.
Okay, so but Michael, then overtime to cover annual leave, sometimes staff aren't available to do overtime because they have worked so hard. Is there no other way that staff can work in the station locally to enable themselves to get their annual leave?
One of the issues I discussed with quite a few colleagues when I was out and about, John, was why are we not able to arrange more local initiatives, local swaps? Frankly, everybody will know there are the days that they will need a day off, and surely there's more opportunity to offer to cover for a colleague a swap. That's not necessarily overtime, to swap a shift, and that colleague owes you one back, and that can be done very simply between two people. It could presumably be done a bit more sophisticated across a number of people. I heard a lot from colleagues saying, oh, we used to do that, and I'm not sure I really understood why that still couldn't be the case. It isn't just a case that because leave is managed centrally by RMC, and that's necessary, and they provide a really important role in that, but in my view that doesn't take away from the potential for some local flexibility, local solutions. And when you've got a reasonable pool of staff, 20, 30 staff on a station, I think there's potential for a bit more swapping of shifts whenever people particularly need a time off, in the knowledge that your colleague will do it for you in return. And I think that would help, particularly with these short term, when people need a day and they just couldn't get it for a wedding, a graduation, those sort of events.